Oh, first, let me say what's good to all my new subscribers. I also want to say, oh, yes, you can see right here in the back, Street Skelzy, Knock 'em Out the Box. That's my novel that is out right now on Amazon Books. It's about two brothers who are on the opposite sides of the law but have to team up in order to find their father's killer. This is a murder mystery. This is not your average hood book. This ain't a get rich quick scheme. This is actually murder mystery, but in the hood way. Check it out. You know what I'm saying? It's a very good read. What else I wanted to say to you here before we get started? Please do not hesitate to hit that like, that subscribe, and that notification bell. I'm looking for it right here. I was actually looking for it. Pardon me here. All right. Here go my. I know here go my like button. All right. So if you want to hit the like button, but I wanted to bring up my other screen as well. So I don't know where is it at. Oh, wait a minute. Is it in? Oh, here we go. Yeah, don't forget. You can catch me on these platforms right here. Let me take my book down. You know what I mean? You can catch me on these platforms right here, as well as many others. I'm actually streaming live on Twitch, Twitter, and Facebook as we talk. See, that's the like button right there. Don't forget to hit that. Yes, yes, yes. The love is there. The love is there. Like I said, I want to welcome all my new viewers, all my new subscribers who hit that like, that notification, and that notification bell so they can know when new content is being uploaded. Forgive me, I'm trying to get that whole thing down. I'm not used to, doing that, but I see it works because you here, you watching, and you learning. Now, on this station right here, we actually deal with Freemasonry and its working mechanisms. Like, we don't just point a finger at something on TV, and we go over real documents, real information, and we present real things to you. So we're actually going over the master's carpet right now, as you can see, the master's carpet, right? So, and as you can see also down here on this ticker, tells you what we will be covering, which is also right here in the back. So, I'm usually, messing up, I be indulging in the herbals. You know what I'm saying? That right there is actually some purple biscotti, right? So it's what it is, right? So I just like everybody to know what's being said after I actually do this. I already did 9, so after I do this, I'm gonna do 10, and we should have enough information for us to do not a conclusion, but another little tighten up to let everybody know like what we just covered within the last 10 chapters. So after hopefully we should get enough out of 10 to do another one, right? Because a lot of the stuff was where we did outside information was in like basically the first 3 to 4 chapters. Then we're into this part, but we're actually gonna go out of this again and cover some more chapters as well. So let's get into this, right? It says Masonic Antiquity. King Solomon, never Grand Master, the SS John, not Masons, nor all the presidents, Arnold a Mason. First meeting held in 1717, sprung up in a grog shop, the Masonic Fathers. The Masonic religion and philosophy revived. signs, grips, and passwords in large government invented. Early succeeding Masons to conflicting Grand Lodges. Masonry conceived in fraud and sustained in deception. Mahabone. By whom, invented, and how. So, as you know, Henry and his father, they've been talking, and so he's been basically explaining him Freemasonry through this conversation, right? Well, Father, you have given me a most startling insight into the real design and character of the Masonic philosophy. But now I am desirous, desirous of knowing how this vast system of deception and desposium first originate. Who invented it? Or was it invented at all? Can its history be tracked back to any definite source? Or is there any truth in the popular assertions that it was organized by a building of Solomon's temple, and King Solomon himself was its first most excellent master? That was the origin. What was the origin of Masonry, and why was it first established? Excuse me, you know how I do in the beginning of this, right? Mr. Burton, the answer to these questions, my dear Henry, leads at once to a full investigation of Masonic antiquity, and fortunately for us, in this as on all other matters pertaining to that institution, we are furnished by Masonic authors and historians themselves with the most minutes and most reliable information. To continue our research, then, we shall begin first of all with the Grand Mastership of King Solomon. On this subject, the Masonic rituals speak as follows. I shall quote only from Mackey, as the monitorial teachings in all Masonic textbooks is the same. The Manual of the Lodge by Mackey, page 55. Our ancient brethren dedicated their lodges to King Solomon because he was our first most excellent Grand Master. And again, on page 109, in reference to the temple, he says, it was symbolically supported also by three principal columns: wisdom, strength, and beauty. Guma Oz Dubar. Right? That doesn't say that there, but we'll be getting into that. Right? Which were represented by the three Grand Masters, King Solomon of Israel, Hiram, king of Tyre, and Hiram of Beth. How both the assertions continued in these extracts stand unsupported by any other testimony in the world and are historically untrue. King Solomon was never a Grand Master of the Freemason Society, and he knew no more about the little mallets and plumbline and hoodwinks and little blue ropes and white aprons of the lodge of speculative masons than he did of the first battle of Bull Run or the Great Chicago Fire. On this point, we have the very clearest and most positive evidence, not only from the highest dignitaries of the order, but also from his grand lodge reports and other official documents. Of these, I shall only select a few. In an address delivered to T.S. Parvin, past Grand Master of and the present Grand Secretary of the Grand Lodge of Iowa, at the grand reception given in 1876 by the Freemasons of Kukuku, I'm hoping I'm saying that right, Kikuku, as published in the Voice of Masonry, page 11, number 11, page 63. He uses the following remarkable language. Such oracles, speaking of the Masonic granically orators, okay, I'm sorry if I'm saying that wrong, okay, are always proclaiming as Masons Enoch that translated Solomon the Wise and the S.S. John of Christian Sanctuary. It is amusing to note that how they always enroll among their numbers the noble and the good of all nations in all the time, as careful excluded the opposite class. How in all candor and with all proper respect to the brethren of this audience, not overlooking my own self-respect as a Mason and a man of mature age, I must declare that such stuff, while it may possibly be told to Marines, certainly to all such heresies, we may apply the injunctions of David in the laminate over Saul, and let it not in Gath published it not in the streets of Ascalon. Such tales will surely sooner or later return to our hurt. I'm thinking that's hurt, right? As they ever should. Or maybe that's heart. Who knows, right? You see right here? I don't know. So I don't know. Don't get me to start lying. Right? Putting words in people's mouths. Tits is true. Tits is pity. And pity tit is. And tits is true. It's true. Right? That even Solomon was no Mason. With all his wisdom, great as it was, he knew no more of the mysteries of Freemasonry than did the beautiful Queen of Sheba, who came from afar to adore his wisdom and the temple he built, if not to love his person, nor is there any evidence, however faint, to prove that either of the S.S. John, the Austri, or the lovely followers of all that is good in heaven or on earth were Masons beyond the wish that it were so by the Christian portion of the universal brotherhood. Nor is it true that all the presidents from Washington to Grant included were or are Masons. The first was, the last is not. And that would the spirits of those anti-Masons and elder and younger Adams and Van Buren and Fillmore say to the cruel accusations, could they but wing their way to the earth and throw back the lie in the face of the falsifiers. It is true, however, and the truth must be told, that Arnold, the single trader of his age and country, was a Mason, right? As it well attested by the record of his lodge in Connecticut, his native state. So much the worse, both for the trader and those who, without evidence or trial, would exclude him from their associates. This is the testimony of one of the most eminent Masons now living, and a man to whom can be confidently relied on for the accurate historical knowledge, being one of the most honorable professors in the state University of Iowa in Iowa City. But we celebrated Dr. Douchu and the complier of the Masonic Constitution in South Carolina in his work entitled As Man Reason, right? Man is A-H, you see it right here, A-H-I, man, right? Reason, right? Published in 1822. Use perhaps still strong language, he says. Neither Adam nor Noah, nor Nimrod, nor Moses, nor Joshua, nor David, nor Solomon, nor John, nor Baptist, nor John the Evangelist belonging to the Masonic order. However congenial their principles may have been, it is unwise to assert more than we can prove and to argue against probabilities. Hypothesis in history is absurd. There is no record, sacred or profane, to induce us to believe that those holy and distinguished men were Freemasons, and our traditions do not go back to their days. To assert that they were Freemasons may make the vulgar stare, but will rather excite the competent contempt than the administration of the wise. Yeah, like I could get that. It'd take a fool to just grab onto that, a wise person, and be like, what are you talking about? Right? In the Grand Lodge Report of Illinois for 1873, empathetically affirms, right? Empathetically affirms on page 63. And while it is true that the fools are not all dead, it may now be safely said that he who teaches that Adam, Seth, or Solomon were Freemasons sins against light and knowledge and ought to be excluded from the platform of instruction. They true. If you're gonna lie, you have to be excluded from being able to tell people how to operate in any way because you're a liar. Also Cornelius Moore of Cincinnati, a celebrated Masonic historian and lecturer and author of a textbook on Freemasonry called The Craftsman and the March number of The Voice of Masonry, 78, page 88, 188, writing on this very same subject of King Solomon's Grand Mastership, expresses himself in the following forcible manner. Everyone who knows anything about it is aware that the pretended charter. So you could probably, I gotta remember. See on here, it's like you still see the little gaps, but it's a little bit better to see if you looking directly on my screen for some reason. Where we at? Grant expresses himself in the following forcible manner. Everyone who knows anything about it is aware that the pretended charter of AD 926 is pure fiction, and that the efforts to trace the history of the order to King Solomon and make him our first most excellent grandmaster is an insult to every member of the order. If we must have a grandmaster of 3,000 years ago, do let us have one who has some claims of mortality and decency. Solomon was a disgrace to his nation as well as a moral sense of the world. Such a man, Grand Master of Masons? No, the whole advertisement, as I said before, is an insult to the moral sense of every intelligent Mason, and the utter of such stuff can only plead ignorance as an excuse for proclaiming it before the world. You would have to, well, that's what they rely on, ignorance. But the question may be asked, is there not a manifest contradiction then between the rural and these Masonic authorities just quoted, where one asserts that King Solomon was and the other that he was not Grand Master? I reply to this, it will only be necessary to say that Freemasonry is the science of religious symbolisms. Everything done in this degree work, every name mentioned, and every implement made, used in this lodge has a symbolic religious meaning. The illusion, no, the illusion, even to the Temple of Solomon, is merely symbolic, denoting a spiritual temple in the heart, and hence, in the name of Solomon himself is used only in the same manner as the symbol of authority, power, greatness, wealth, and wisdom. On this point, the Manual of the Lodge by Mackey, page 20, I want to say 5 or 26, speaks as follows. The fact is that in Masonry, all allusions to the Temple of Solomon are simply symbolic, and while the great symbol of a material temple prefiguring a spiritual one is preserved, no care has ever been taken to obtain correctness of architectural detail, or even as strictly historical facts. When we come to examine the symbolism of the lodge and inquire into the reasons for its government by a master and two wardens, we shall have occasion to refer again to the symbolic use of the name of Solomon in the Masonic philosophy, but for the present, it is enough for us to know that it is a historical fact that he never was of the Masonic Grand Lodge, nor was Freemasonry first organized in Judah, nor at the building of the temple. This being the case, then the question naturally arises, when and where did our present system of Grand Lodge Masonry, or as it is commonly called, speculative Freemasonry, first originated? Unquestionably, there was a time when all such vigorously titles as Worshipful Master, Most Worshipful Grand Master, Most Excellent High Priest, Most Excellent King, Trice, Lewis, Grand Master, Trice, Pursuant, Grand Master, Grand Elect, Perfect, and Sublime Mason, and Most Pursuant, Sovereign Grand Commander were entirely unknown. At what period then did these extravagant, subsequent, let me make sure y'all can see that right there, right? Come to be applied to the tailors, cobblers, counter jumpers, pothouse politicians. See all of these dudes, dancing masters, and humble Christians who largely compose the Masonic institution. Masonic history itself furnishes on this point all the necessary information, and does it so accurately to giving the name of persons and places and describing what actually occurred in such a clear and comprehensive manner that no doubt can possibly remain as the birthplace and origin and present age of Grand Lodge and speculative Freemasonry. In the Digest of Freemasonic Law by G.W. Chase, page 10, we read, on the accession of George I, the Masons of London, that is the stonemasons, in its evasions revolve to revive the communications and annual festivals of the society, with this view the lodges at Goose and Gridiron in St. Paul's Churchyard, the Crown and Parker's Lane, the Apple Tree Tavern in Charles Street, Convert Garden, and the Rummers and Grapes Tavern and Channel Row, Westminster, the only lodges existed in south of England at the time, which some other old brethren met at the Apple Tree Tavern, above mentioned in February 1717, and having voted the oldest Master Mason then present in the chair, constituted themselves a Grand Lodge pro tempore. Right? This was the first meeting ever held, and this is the first time of which we have any record in the history of the world, either sacred or profane, when any mention whatever is made of a Grand Lodge or any other lodge of speculative masonry. All right, let me stop again. Take a quick minute here. See anybody come through. Let you know. Don't forget to check out my book, Street Skelzy, Knock 'em Out the Box. It's available right now on Amazon Books. It's by your boy, M.A. Wave, a.k.a. Juice Wanna. Right? This is a book about two brothers on opposite sides of the law who must team up in order to find their father's killer before the other police mess the whole thing up and most likely let the killers get away or kill her. Right? So this is a murder mystery. It takes you around the tri-state area, up and down, all across. I mean, it's a great hood adventure book, but it is not a, come up story. Like I said, this is something different. In urban writing, I bring mystery. So this is a murder mystery. Thank you. Thank you. And don't forget, right? You can catch me on these platforms as well as many others. Right now, I'm actually streaming on Twitch, Facebook, and Twitter right now. Oh, and by the way, don't forget to hit that like button, that subscribe, and that. Oh, thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you. I love you too, right? That subscribe and that notification bell so you can get all the new uploads and content that I present live or uploaded. Yes, and it helps actually with the algorithm so other people can actually find me. That's how I actually obtained the new followers that I have now. So thank you very much to everybody who pressed that like button and let me circulate throughout the system. Okay, let's get back to this reading. This was the first meeting ever held, and this is the first time. I'm speculative. Okay. At the very best, then, we find that it is but a self constituted society, my offering of a low grog shop in numbering among its first members about a score or more of a controversial free and easy stone masons who occasionally frequented the Apple Tree Tavern and other saloons in the purest of London, as mentioned by George Wingate Chase. Viewing it today in its despotic attitude of self-righteousness, observing its impotent assumptions of power and popularity, and its utter defiance of public opinion, and listening to the high-flown eloquence of its grand orators, grand kings, and grand high priests, one of the forcibly reminded that famous exclamations of the town clerk of Euphrates, Euphrates, in reference to Diana and that celebrated image which he pompously claimed had fallen down from Jupiter. Great is Diana, of the Euphrates. Great now is the freemasonry of the Apple Tree Tavern. But again, I read from the law book, Digest of Masonic Law, page 11. Accordingly, on the 24th of June, 1717, the new assembling and feast were held at the Goose and Gridiron Tavern in St. Paul's Churchyard, and a complement of the oldest lodge which met there. And the oldest Master Mason and Master of the Lodge having taken a chair, and lists the candidates for the office of Grand Master was produced, out of which by a majority of hands and brethren elected Mr. Anthony Sayer Grand Master and Mason of the ensuing year, who was forthwith invented by the said oldest master and installed by the master of the oldest lodge. The Grand Master then appointed his wardens, Captain Joseph Elliott and Mr. Jacob Lambeau, and commanded the brethren of the four lodges to meet him in his wardens quarterly in communications. This is the Grand Lodge of Masons, and these are the grand officers that ever existed, or of which there is any account. Masonry then traces its history back from the present time to this June meeting at the Goose and Gridiron Tavern in 1717, and given the name of all the succeeding Grand Masters from that time to this. But prior to that, all is Egyptian darkness as regards speculative masonry in its present form. So basically, it's freestyling. We find that Anthony Sayer of London and not King Solomon of Jerusalem was the first Grand Master. Captain Joseph Elliott and not Hiram of Tyre was the first Grand Senior Warden, and that Jacob Lambeau, a carpenter, and not Hiram Abiff, was brass furnisher of Temple fame, was the first Grand Junior Warden. My fault there. But we have still further and perhaps stronger testimony on this subject. Mr. A.T.C. Pearson, than whom no higher Mason and no better authority can be found in the world, says in his Traditions of Freemasonry, page 253. A.D. 1717 was a new epoch in the history of Freemasonry, immediately prior to which time but few lodges were in existence. The society was composed of working masons and only masons. The only exceptions were made in favor of men distinguished from rank, scientific attainments, or possessions of in civil life. And I'm saying on St. John the Evangelist's Day of the above mentioned year, an annual feast was held for the first time in several years. Several new regulations were adopted, one of which authorized the acceptance of members without reference of occupation or pursuit. Previous to AD 1717, those who were accepted into the fraternity and those who were operative were designated as gentlemen masons. After the change of the regulations governing admissions was made, we find the term speculative mason used. This place of birth of speculative Freemasonry beyond a question, and not only so, but it fixes the exact time, even when the words accepted and speculative were first used in connection with the system. From all the foregoing testimony, then, we learn three very important facts which must materially aid us in understanding this subject. First, that up to the year 1717, the only form of masonry existed in the world was operative masonry, and that the only Masonic organizations were stonemasons unions. Second, that into these stonemason unions or societies, some distinguished men who were not masons were occasionally admitted or accepted, and who were afterwards designated as gentlemen masons. And third, that in February 1717, at a general meeting of those trade unions held in a saloon called the Apple Tree Tavern, in London, a resolution was passed abolishing the hetero exclusive, hetero hetero exclusive, right? Charter of those societies altogether, and accepted men to worship without reference to occupation or pursuit, and whether distinguished or not, provided only their moral character was not very bad, nor their pocketbooks empty. So depending on how bad you was, we just need your pockets. We need your pockets up there. You can pay like you weigh, right? This February meeting, as we are further informed, was composed of a scattered remnant of four lodges in the south of England, being the only ones then in existence, who constituted themselves as General Assembly for the future regulations and government of the new organization. And this is the germ of what is today called ancient masonry. In the origin of our present grand large system of Masonic government, sometime previous to this first meeting at the Apple Tree Tavern, of which, however, Masonic history furnishes no record. Among others, one James Anderson, a Scotchman, and John Thurpolis Dougliers. Okay, you see it right here. Theophius. I can't get his last name. I got Theophius in there. Okay, a French infidel refugee were admitted as gentlemen masons, right? The Delucius was afterward elected Grand Master in 1719, and was learned from Pearson. Mr. George Payne was elected in 1720, and John Duke of Montague in 1721, while Anderson published in 1723 the charges of a Freemason, the first book of Freemasonry that ever saw the light. And these are the Masonic fathers who subsequently blamed so active in connection with Sayer, Elite, Lambeau, and others in compiling and perfecting the Masonic degrees. And in propagating the principles of the system, whenever British commerce or British influence could introduce the Nexius pestilence, my fault. Right. And in relations to the wonderful zeal manifested in the prosecution of their self-imposing task, the rapidity with which new degrees were multiplied, the number of qualities and various Masonic rites manufactured, and unprecedentedly popularity which the newfangled system suddenly acquired in England, France, and Germany, the real design which the early managers of the institution had in view, and the only motives by which they were accurate and disseminating a knowledge of the wonderful mysteries. Mr. Pearson furnishes the following graphic description of his traditions of Freemasonry, pages 254 through 323. The fraternity became a popular and designing men sought to make us of it for their own selfish purpose. New degrees were created and became a rage everywhere, but more particularly in France and Germany, which became the hotbed, as it were, of so-called Masonic degrees, whose members were legion. Many of these degrees were arranged in systems or rites, most of which had their day and died out. A few, however, became popular and have continued to be cultivated. Soon after the revival of the South, the revival in South of England, the improved system was introduced into France and Germany by the English residents of both countries. Here, as England, the society became very popular, but the caprice of the intriguing spirits of that time assumed a different phase and range. The rage was for new degrees with high sounding titles, showy costumes. This seems to be the rage even to present day. That matters. That matters a lot. The politicians, the priests, the philosophers, the astrologers, the deitists, the religionists, the ambitious took advantage of the prevalent idea. Kings, princes, statesmen, clergymen, politicians, tailors, the men of science, in fact, men of all ranks of life became actively engaged in manufacturing degrees and arranging rites to advance their particular interests, theories, dogmas, or ambitious pretensions, right? The list enumerates upwards of 3,000 degrees, each claiming to be Masonic or analogous thereto, and all created within 3/4 of a century after the revival. From this testimony, furnished by one of the leading Masons of America, we learn the following important fact. First, that the work performed at the February and June meetings of 1717 was a revival of the Masonic philosophy. Second, that the newly revived philosophy on being introduced into Germany and France, written backwards, and being exactly suited for the spirit of infidelity and free thought prevailing in these countries spread with amazing rapidity. And the third, that the entire movement was controlled and managed by intriguing spirits who were almost constantly employed in manufacturing new degrees and arranging rites with high sounding titles and showy costumes. Just such titles and costumes as are worn today by the most pursuant sovereign grand kings, the most excellent grand high priest, and by the thrice illustrious elect perfect and sublime masons, who almost daily strut our streets in dramatic America. Fourth, that all these degrees and rights were manufactured for the sole purpose of advancing the interests and ambitions, pretentious and theories or the dogmas of their different designing authors. And lastly, that during the time which intervened from the first saloon meeting in February 1717 until the last finishing touch was given to the Royal Arch degree, as we shall learn by and by. No less than 3,000 Masonic degrees had been manufactured and sold for cash in England, France, and Germany. What a startling history of the origin of Freemasonry this is. And what a singular commentary on the indifference and subversiveness or the cowardice of society, that an institution professedly organized by such cunning knaves and for such base purposes, and which has been sustained by fraud, falsehood, and deception from the commitment of its career to the present time, should be permitted today to detect, to any virtue to rule the nation and to create such a dread in communities that even some of the ministers of Christian denominations who detest its vile philosophy and who would like to see it swept from the face of the earth are absolutely afraid to mention its name, either in the pulpit, the prayer meetings, or the Sabbath school, lest its secret vendetta vengeance might, in some concealed manner, be wreaked upon them. Now, having accurately ascertain the exact date when and where speculative Freemasonry was organized, the name of the residence of its first officials, the very place even where its first meetings were held, and the circumstances attaining its early history and rapid growth. The next question which demands attention is, where did Anderson, DeSuguio, and company find the material from which its degrees were compiled? And how did these degrees come to be arranged into a system and rights as we now have them? The Grand Lodge of Illinois gives the best answer on record to these questions. In the Grand Lodge reports of 1878, page 128, we read as follows. The first of the charges of a Freemason is the trademark concerning God and religion. It cannot be urged that this charge is to be interpreted by the light of the legend and ceremonies of the third degree, and that it is in any manner qualified by them by the third degree, was not manufactured until about the year 1721, when its legend was adapted to masonry from certain idle tales taken out of the Jewish targums published in London in 1715 from a MS and University Library of Cambridge. And Dr. Mackey, in his Encyclopedia of Freemasonry, claims that the third degree was not manufactured until about the year 1738. All right, so up here is saying, right, so then we have it on the express declaration of the Sovereign Grand Lodge, and even the legend of the very best and most important of all the Masonic degrees has been adapted from certain idle tales taken out of the Jewish Targums. Okay, that's what it is, Targums. And yet, these same idle tales and the sublime degrees founded upon them are claimed to be of divine origin, the sublime doctrine of divine truth, beyond which it cannot be conceived that anything can be suggested more, which the soul of man requires. And professing Christian and Christianity ministers pretended to believe in this ridiculous absurdity and solemnly swear to maintain and support it, right or wrong. And again, in the Traditions of Freemasonry by Pearson, page 16, we read, to found the University of Freemasonry upon a few traditions, STW, which we have taught in the interior degrees, is flying in the face of Masonic experience and in our universal spread doctrine, and in the opposition to the first principles of the craft. It is admitted that we are in possession of numerous legends which are not found in the Holy Writ, but being of very ancient date are entitled in consideration, although the authenticity of some of them may be questioned, yet we regard it as interesting and useful to gather up the traditions noticed in the early ages, which floating downward on the stream of time have been arrested and preserved for our meditations and instruction. It is precisely what Anderson, Dassigler, Montague, and the rest of their co-workers did in the period from 1717 to 1738. They arrested and preserve the traditions, notices, the idle tales, the pagan legends of the early ages, which of course are not to be found in Holy Writ. And these traditional legends or idle tales, although of questionable antiquities, they in, pardon me, right? Interspreaders with mutilated and garbled quotations from the Bible, thus forming degrees in which they afterward arranged into a regular system or series, constituting what is called a rite. Of these Masonic rites of systems, four still exist and are cultivated at the present time, namely the York Rite, or 4 degrees, the England and the British province, the French or modern rite of 7 degrees, and in French and Belgium, an ancient and accepted Scottish rite of 33 degrees of Europe and America, and the American or Webb rite, or 13 degrees of the United States alone. Symbolic or Blue Lodge Masonry, however, consists of the entered apprentice, fellow craft, and master mason degrees, is the foundation of every system and is only pure Freemasonry in existence. All the other degrees, except about 12 of which are termed chivalric, being but so many developments or elaborations of the Master Mason degree. The chivalric degrees, such as the Knights Templar, Knights of Malta, and Company, are not generally considered Masonic, although engrafted into the system, because none can take these who reject Christianity, and this rule destroys that principle of universality which constitutes the very essence and is the constant boast of the Masonic system. As a striking illustration, the manner in which the Masonic degrees were first manufactured and the cunning and the deception practiced in their introductions, it will only be necessary to examine the origin and early history of the Royal Arch and the final completion of the Master Mason's degree as furnished by our past Grand Master Pearson. In the Traditions of Freemasonry, page 320, 322, he says, but no, about AD 740, the chivalry Ramsay appeared in London. He was a Scotchman by birth, but had long been a resident of France, a zealous patron of the pretended Charles, son of James II. He sought to advance the steward's interest by the use of masonry. He brought with him several new degrees, which was endeavored to induce the English lodges. Among these degrees was one which was called Royal Arch. Previous to this, however, that it is in 1736, a number of influential Masons headed by one Lawrence Dermont succeeded from the irresponsible Apple Tree Tavern concern and organized for themselves an opposition Grand Lodge, which their headquarters at the small town called York, at the north of England, whence they subsequently received the name of York Masons. These sexiers or York Masons immediately styled themselves ancient, hence the high sounding title of Ancient York Masons. While to the London gang, they diversely applied the term modern. Where we at? Term modern. And thus, these contending factions have professed to incalculate so strongly the beatifics tenets of friendship and brotherly love continue to manifest towards each other a bitterest ammunicities did everything that jealousy and self-interest could prompt to destroy one another popularity and mutually wage a most uncompromising warfare during the space of 77 years, and we're only reconciled at last as recently as 1813 by the infatigable efforts of Duke of Sussex, who was elected Grand Master of Masons in that year. Bearing these facts in mind, we shall be better enabled to understand the full meaning and the rememberer of Pearson's narrative. Rejected, he says, by the Grand Lodge of the Apple Tree Tavern. He, i.e., Ramsay, next sought alliance with the ancients. Here, too, he was foiled so far as an ulterior object were concerned. The shrewd Lawrence Demont, who was for many years an active spirit among the secretary, saw the new degrees by means of drawing attention to the ancient lodges and to increase their popularities. After a time, it was claimed and asserted that the moderns or apple tree tavern masons were ignorant of the master's part and that the ancients alone, i.e., the sextors, had that knowledge, and that there were 4 degrees of ancient Freemasonry, whereas the Grand Laws acknowledged and knew but three. You will not fail to notice that the very conception of the whole Masonic scheme is a fraud and a swindle from the beginning. But the story goes on. Embalmed by success in AD, 1756, Dermont published his Ashman Rhizome, in which similar statements were made. Thomas Duckery, an intelligent son, I say intelligent. Oh, swear. It goes Tom Dunkerley, an illegitimate son of George II, a man of whom brilliant intelligence, I'm looking at the 2 right there for some reason, was chosen master of a regular lodge in AD 1717. He was assumed a high position. He assumed a high position among the distinguished Masons of his age, and finally became became Grand Master. Visiting the ancient lodge, he became acquainted with the new degrees and resolved that they should not appropriate to themselves a single pearl of any real value towards the elucidations of the craft. He determined to introduce the degree into the regular lodge, divesting the degrees as practiced by the ancients for of many of its crudiates. In fact, remodeling it and revising the literature, he presented a Holy Royal Arch degree of the Grand Lodge. It was at once found that the practice of this new degree required a change, in that the Master Mason's degree, a removal and substitution, a transfer, says Dr. Oliver in the Master's words. The new degrees, having received a patronage of the Duke of Clarence, brother of King, united with his own influence, enabled Dunkerley to successfully carry his project through. And since AD 1779, the Holy Royal Arch has been cultivated under the authority of the Grand Lodge of England, Apple Tree Tavern Grand Lodge, and the degrees declares to be part of ancient masonry. And thus, in 1779, the Holy Royal Arch and the sublime degree of Master Masons were both perfected, and the revival began by Anderson, Douglas, Sawyer, and Company in 1717, was finally affected. The necessary changes was made and removal to substitute took place. The word Jehovah was removed from the Master Mason's degree, transferred to Dunkerley, Royal Arch, and Mahabone, as we now have it, was invented and substituted as the Grand Masonic word in its stead. From this authority, then furnished as it is by the Masons, than whom there is none higher in the world, we at once learned that instead of the master degrees being lost through the pretended death of Hiram and the building of Jerusalem's temple, it was simply transferred in 1779 to a new degree, and Mahabone substituted in its place. And we also learned that instead of Solomon, king of Israel, Hiram, king of Tyre, and Hiram Abith, being the principal founders and promoters of the Masonic temple system, and Ramsay, Dermot, and Dunkerley were the chief manipulators of our saloon bantling, and hence that to these latter worthies alone must be ascribed all the glory of these finishing touches, which have left the institution in the form in which we now find it. All right? So that's the end of chapter 8. I'm thinking about coming right back and doing chapter 10 so that I can just see if we can get into the wrap up. Until then, people, I'm up out of here. Don't forget, hit that like, hit that subscribe, and hit that notification so you can get the constant updates whenever new material is being uploaded or when I go live. I try to go live at least 2-3 times, a week. And thank you, right? And I do take questions and answers. I will address any shows, any topics that you want to present, and I'll get into it. But until then, like I said, people, till next time, y'all hold it down.